Hey everybody, I'm Julian with DevExpress, and welcome to the dark side, using XtraReports in innovative ways, presented by technical evangelist Paul, Usher, and myself. Now in this webinar, Paul and I will explore new and out-of-the-ordinary ways of creating and using reports that you may not have known about before. We'll investigate how to bind a report to a plain old CLR object, how to create complex reports and combine them, create a report writer bound to business objects and web services, and we'll discuss the issues you'll encounter when you need to provide the ability to produce reports with a word processor. Now this session is being recorded and it will be available on our DevExpress YouTube channel later on today. We'll also do a live Q&A at the end of the presentation. Just type your questions in your GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. Questions may also be answered during the presentation as well. Now, without further ado, I'll introduce Paul. Paul, are you there?
Sitting right next to you again, Julian.
Oh yes, there you are.
Second time this week. It's quite a privilege.
Yes, we're in the same room in the DevExpress offices at the same time and using the same microphone.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So what?
Now, using XtraReports in innovative ways. XtraReports, I think, is a little bit of a dark horse when it comes to how much functionality it can actually deliver for users. And I certainly know that when I get customers contacting me either via email or via phone, etc., that they come with real-world problems. And that's one of the things that I wanted to try and address today, is taking a look at some of the, not complicated, but out-of-the-box thinking when it comes to XtraReports. So we're going to start by jumping in and having a quick look at XtraReports inside the IDE.
Okay.
We will explain the end-user data, the end-user report builder, how to bind to some POCOs or plain old CLR objects, and then look at other functions such as combining multiple reports for some really outstanding results. And then I'm going to explore some alternate solutions when it comes to things where XtraReports might not quite fit.
Okay.
And hopefully you're going to answer all the questions as we go through.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
So let's start out by taking a quick overview as to the report designer inside Visual Studio. What I'm going to do to start with is just use a solution that we've created. At the moment it's got a data class, which I'll explain when we get to the POCO side of things, and then a report demo. As it stands, I've just got a basic Windows form in there, nothing special. And what I want to do is actually add the end user, sorry, not the end user, but the report designer into this project.
Okay.
So we're going to start by going File, New Item, which I'm not. I'll right-click over here instead.
I was just going to say, hey, this is
and do
a novel way of doing these things.
A new item. Once you've installed the DevExpress toolset, you'll see that the report wizard is showing here. We'll start by creating a sample report, and we'll call it Employee List. I was going to do a pay slip, but I figured you might not.
Hey, I've got nothing in my pay slip, so.
So Employee List and Add, and what we're going to see is the report wizard get shown. From this point, we can see that there are a number of preset templates. We've got the empty report, data bound report. We've got some layouts for labels, which is always interesting, and the ability to work with an inherited report. I'm going to choose a data-bound report and select Next. And then we've got these report data sources. Database is what we'll look at. XtraReports has got full support for Entity Framework, and object binding that we'll have a look at as well. When I choose Database, I'm actually going to create a new connection parameter because there's a few things that I want to call out to.
All right.
First and foremost is the number of providers that are available to XtraReports out of the box. We've got SQL Server, we've got Access 97, 2007, SQL CE, Oracle, we've got support for Amazon Redshift, Teradata, Firebird, IBM, DB2, MySQL, Pervasive, Postgres, SAP, and the list goes on. So out of the box there's a lot of support built in, including the fact that you can also bind to just an XML file.
Okay.
And of course, if that's not enough, and one of the things I want to talk about today is going to be just standard classes.
Right.
So as far as the server name, we should have a server on here called XtraReports and a database called AdventureWorks, which of course is one of the Microsoft samples.
Oh, indeed.
I hit next again, and it will ask if I want to save my connection string. Now at this point, I can actually select either a pre-built stored procedure or I can generate a new query. So I'm going to use the query builder to do that. Unfortunately, with our screen real estate restrictions here, we're not going to see the OK button until I do that. You'll notice as I come through and select a table, if I double click, it's going to highlight other tables that are linked with foreign keys throughout that. So that's quite nice. If I wanted to add a business entity, I can do it quickly within the query builder. I'm going to select person as the table I want.
Okay.
At this point, I could work with a query as you'd be used to doing.
And I see the select statement on the side there it's going to generate.
Absolutely. I click OK. Here's the query it's going to build. At this point, I can run through and it will allow me to select which reports or which fields and things I want on the report.
Okay.
Now for speed, I'm actually going to cancel that and I'm going to go back through and quickly add the item again. But I'm going to choose a blank, oops, template
Need to
gallery.
change the name, yeah.
I want the report wizard. Oh dear. Let's quit that.
And basically we're showing everybody this is live.
It certainly is. New item.
Right.
This time I want the report wizard. And I'm going to choose an empty report. The key thing here is the fact that the report designer is embedded inside the IDE. So we've added all the tooling directly into Visual Studio. Now that's really cool because we've got access to menus along the top where we can pick up our field list, Report Explorer. We've got our grouping, sorting. On the right-hand side, I've got these panels already exposed. As you'd expect, as I move my mouse around, I can adjust the detail, the header, the footer. And remember that XtraReports is based around a banded report solution. Right. So think of it in terms of maybe an invoice or a purchase order where you're going to have a summary block and then multiple detail lines and then a footer or something like that.
Right.
What I want to draw your attention to is this important little icon up on the top left. Now this invokes the report tasks. From here, we get to employ things such as our watermark, style sheets. XtraReports supports a lot of cool formatting rules, which we'll see the result of a little later. We can set our reporting units and other things. What I want to do to start with is actually set my data source. And again, as soon as I do this, I'm going to see that wizard.
Right.
Only this time it's not going to want to select all of the extra fields or want to lay the report out for me. I'll come in here and do my SQL Express and choose AdventureWorks again.
All right, same thing.
Query, run query builder.
And obviously I could just type the query in if I was SQL savvy, shall we say.
You certainly can.
And but this is an easier way of detail which fields you need, which tables you need, and so on and so forth.
I think a lot of people are still more comfortable with the idea of working with a visual designer in that sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now what we can see here on the right hand side is the field list. We can see it's bound to the data source and I've got this object person. If I wanted all the fields, I could simply drag that top element and it would try and fit every field across the page, which would be nice but not necessarily what I want. So instead I'm just going to drag first name. Unfortunately my Bluetooth mouse is
acting up already?
Sticky today. And I'm going to choose a person type, which might be the employee class. As well as having direct access to the field list, I've got a swag of different tools inside the toolbox that the report will actually expose. And we'll see more of those when we jump onto the end-user report designer.
All right then.
Right now, down the bottom here, I can switch to my preview mode, and we're going to see very quickly the document is generated. And from memory, there's quite a number of pages on this one. So 75 pages of many hundreds of pages.
Many hundreds of pages, not just 75. And the interesting thing about XtraReports is it generates the first page immediately and displays that, and then goes in the background to, as you can see here, generate the remaining pages. And yes, we have an awful lot of records in this particular table, and we've finally got all 909 pages generated in the background.
So that's pretty cool. I want to make a quick call out as well, the fact that XtraReport has full support for scripting. So if I wanted to, I could actually work with my report elements, whether it be the data or the building blocks on the page within that report itself.
Right.
And the scripting supports both C# and VB.
Nice.
So straight away I've got some advanced functionality. I'm going to switch back to the designer, and we can see that that's starting to set us scene for basic reporting. Now, if I was using one of the data providers, all straightforward.
Right.
I will quickly mention the fact that we also have calculated fields. So instead of using first name and last name, I could actually come along, I could create a calculated field, and I could edit that expression, and instead I could say first name plus space plus last name. And that would give me one field as that combined. So
okay.
Plenty of functionality there. All well and good when it comes to binding straight through to a database.
Which in essence is the main use case for XtraReports is, you have a database, you've been collecting data out the wazoo, and you just basically want to report on that data.
That's true, but there are a number of cases where people want to build reports or build information that's not just straight data driven. It's going to be more ad hoc.
Right.
Let's do something else. Let's go in and create the end user report designer, and we'll use that as the basis for looking at some of these other options. So here what I want to do is come in and just drop in a new Windows form so that you can see it's all happening in real time. We'll call it report designer or report design. Make sure I selected the right thing this time. And here's our blank canvas for that. Did you know, by the way, you used the word wazoo on Tuesday as well?
Did I?
Is that a British thing or?
Out the wazoo? I don't know. I picked it up from somewhere.
Hopefully it's not offensive to any of our listeners. Okay, at this point, I don't want the word extra, I want the word report. And we can see that there are two tools in the toolbox. Standard Report Designer, Ribbon Report Designer. Now this is really down to a personal preference. It's going to build the template tool onto the form. Some people don't think that Ribbon is necessarily should be the new standard. It's been around for a while. And the question that I've got for you, Julian, is if Ribbon is so good, why is Visual Studio still standard tools?
Probably because developers are not Ribbon fans. I don't know. Designers are Ribbon fans and the developers are not. I don't know.
Interesting topic. All right, so what we've got happening here, I've literally just dropped the report design tool onto the canvas, and the tooling inside the IDE has now gone through and added, or is in the process of adding everything to that form.
Exactly.
As we saw when we added the report directly into our project, we've got this designer element being created. At this point, I'm going to hit save. I'll bring up my solution. I need to edit the program.cs file in order to make this my startup form, so I'll just say rep design, and I want to run that and see what that experience is like.
Okay.
One of the really cool things with XtraReports is the fact that you can ship this end user report designer directly to your customers free of charge.
It is just a complicated control.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's no licensing restrictions, which I think is amazing considering a number of vendors choose to license their product that way. So it could be that you want to give your customer the ability to modify their invoice layouts or generate their own custom reports. Right. You can provide that out of the box, and as you saw, I haven't written any code.
That's right. You just dropped it on the form. You basically changed the name of the form, and that was it.
So here I could go through and create a report by the wizard, or I could drop a new report onto my control. This is the toolbox I mentioned earlier with a number of different controls built in. So we've got typical labels, checkboxes.
And these are report controls. These are not UI controls, they're report controls. They're going to be on the report and producing data or displaying data as the report is run.
Absolutely. So you can do your binding, you can put a Spark line, or even add sub-reports, which starts to add a lot of functionality as well. Because it is just a control on a canvas, you can nominate what functionality your end user will see. It may be that you don't want them to access the property grid or other things. You might want to add new buttons onto the toolbar, and we'll take a look at that in a little while. This is all well and good. We've got our report designer. We know that we could bind it some data, but now I want to do some binding to a POCO or plain old CLR object. In other words, in this example, a C# class.
Okay, well, this is where the interesting stuff starts.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned before as to why people might want to do that. And in essence, not everything can be drawn as simply as a table with some relationships.
Right.
And I think developers sometimes spend way too much time inside queries, trying to link tables, trying to get subqueries to run, trying to return multiple elements, and I just frankly don't see the need for it. What we have here is a simple data class. I've got a property called a list of person, which I've called people.
Right.
I've got the instantiation here happening to call create sample data, so I'm just adding in a few persons.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And if I look,
person class.
if I look at the person class, it's quite literally just some basic properties.
It is a plain old CLR object.
But what would be really interesting if I wanted to say, well, okay, we know that you've got a big baseball card collection, you've got a stamp collection, you've got something else, things that aren't relative to each other. I could very easily come in and extend this reporting class by adding collections.
Right.
So what you can end up with, and it's really cool for reporting, is a collection of a collection of a collection's collection. And it becomes this ad hoc reporting that provides so much power out of the box.
So in other words, you could, the plain old CLR object is not necessarily just a plain old CLR object. It could be extremely complicated tree-like structure or a network type structure instead.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, there is one thing to remember. The essence of this is that you're going to pass the object through to the report at runtime.
Right.
But it still needs to be a collection in and of itself.
Oh, I see. So it's not necessarily, it is not a plain old CLR object. It's a plain old CLR collection
of that object.
Of that object. I see.
So if you had a complex document, for example, where you've got a summary page, multiple reports, and a cover,
right.
Whilst that is one report, that is one document you're trying to get out there, when you pass it to the report generator, you must wrap it in its own collection.
Okay.
It's a little gotcha, and basically if you're trying this and you find that you've got no data in your report, and you're like, but the object's got data in, wrap it in its, a simple list will do, or some kind of generic collection.
So if it's just one object, it still has to be one object in a collection. A collection of one object. Okay, understand.
Easy. Now, what I'm going to do here is just add the BB data. So I'm going to create a new property. It's going to be BB data. If I
think you need to add a user or a reference to it somewhere.
Make sure we're in the right project here. So we've got our report designer, and I'm inside my report designer. My code behind. And inside our class, I want BB data.
That's it.
.data, and we'll just call this a data object. And we'll make it a property. So we're going to, there we go with the curly brace mistake again. We're going to do a get and a set on that.
Okay.
Not sure about the sharing keyboards, Julian. It's making me a little nervous.
I know. Sorry, I'll move my hands out of the way next time.
Now, I'm going to run this demo. All I've done here is create a property to my data class. Okay. Anybody wondering why it's called BB data? Originally, I was going to build this around some baseball cards and lots of data I have, but unfortunately that didn't happen. Here, I'm going to say bring up a new report. So I'm now inside the end user report designer. I could do this inside Visual Studio as well, but I want to show some of that extra functionality.
Yeah, because after all, the end user report designer is exactly the thing that appears inside Visual Studio.
Correct.
Yeah, it's just wrapped in a different way.
So here what I want to do is bind to an object. I choose next, and what's happened is we can see my BB data class.
Okay. So it's done a bit of reflection in the background kind of thing to try and find it? Or?
Absolutely. So it's gone back through and said what objects are exposed via properties in this particular project. And in this case, we've got BB data. I'm going to choose next, and I want my data class. I go next, and I want to select a member that I want to bind to. So here we're binding to that people object,
okay,
which is the collection inside my data class.
Right, got you.
It's not overly complicated. In essence,
no.
It's a collection of the object. I go next, and the option here is to just retrieve the schema or to retrieve the data. So for this presentation, we'll choose retrieving the data.
Okay.
We can now see that my object data source on the right contains all these elements. So at this point, I'm going to drag in first name, last name, gender, and date of birth. Don't worry, Julian. I used some dummy data for you.
I don't want everybody to know how really old I am.
Now, in this case, it's a date field, so I want to choose format string. I can come to date time, and I can quickly select one of these options here. If I wanted to, I could apply a custom format.
Okay.
Choose OK. Let's shrink that up a little bit. Of course, if I wanted to sort the data, I could do so at this point. I could create groups here. And this is the functionality I'm giving to the end user. So, again, quite powerful.
Yes, that's right. We are inside the end user's application here. We're not inside Visual Studio anymore. So
now when I do a print preview, we get a whole list of, well, a list of the key people, I think, here at DevExpress.
Absolutely.
With their gender and fictitious, I want to point out, dates of birth. According to this, you were born in 64. Welcome to
as old as my car, yes.
Welcome to the dark side. Now, that's using a plain old CLR object or a C# class, a collection, is as difficult as it should get. However, we're in the end user report designer.
Right.
So it could be that when I ship the report, I don't want the user having to go through that wizard. I don't want them having to worry about what BB data is or all those sorts of things.
Yeah, which do I choose? Do I choose database, or do I choose this object thing, or do I choose entity framework? Yeah, the end user is not going to be that kind of person that they will understand the difference between all three and what the ramifications of them are. So can we limit it in some way?
Well, that guarantees certainly more support calls. So
yes.
Yes, we can limit it. And it's also another good example of why I prefer to use classes in reporting rather than just binding straight to a database. If I give the user access to a database, even if I've got to mess around with, or instead of messing around with views, by generating these report classes, I'm controlling exactly what information the user is going to see.
I agree.
Yes. They don't have to, this particular item here might be only half a dozen fields I've exposed of a 100 field table.
Right.
So we can do that in a couple of interesting ways. Because this is just a set of controls, as you pointed out before, I could actually override the code behind when you select a new report. Likewise, and it's another great example, if I was to choose save or save as, I could intercept that and actually store the user's report definition back in my database rather than letting them have to worry about where something's going to go.
Exactly. They don't have to search for a folder. It's just going to get saved into their place somewhere out there in the cloud or in the database or wherever it happens to be.
And so it puts the developer back in control as to what's going on.
Uh-huh.
But what we're going to do now is actually come through, no, we won't save that, and we'll jump over to the IDE. Again, it's a DevExpress ribbon control.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in here I can access. I can add new elements. I can edit elements. So with that,
all we've done essentially is to generate a standard ribbon, but it's still a ribbon control with standard controls inside the ribbon. And you can alter them and remove them or move them, or do anything, or add new ones, as you say.
Absolutely. It is a ribbon control, but the boffins in the engineering team
Boffins. Haven't heard that one for a while.
They've hooked up the code behind so that if I was to have a look behind this ribbon control, in fact, if I go F7 right now, if I come off the menu first, and F7, there is no code in here. Right. But we know that the new report works. We know that the save report works. It's all happening in the framework behind the scenes.
Gotcha.
I can override that, or I can come along and I can say I want to add a new button.
Okay.
Now I'm going to drag my button over here. I'm going to bring up the properties window, and we'll call this BB new person. So I want a new person report.
Okay.
Our caption will be new person. And we'll come down to the large glyph. Now, Julian, did you know that we now ship images inside our framework?
Indeed we do. The image gallery, we've been adding images to it for a while. There are several different styles to the images. You can use them within your own applications. Royalty-free, essentially.
Absolutely. So when the normal image picker comes up, you'll see a new tab called the DX Image Gallery. You can quickly jump through all the different options here, limiting what you actually get to see. Right. You can jump between the 16 and 32-bit versions, and then there's some specialty ones in there as well. Since it's a report about people,
let's find a person.
Let's find a person. But I don't want to spend all day finding a person either. Oh, look, there's a search box there. I could probably use that.
Okay, where are the people?
Where are the people? Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
person.
Right, brilliant.
And I'll use Mr. Green.
Why not?
So now we've got this custom button. If I was to run this, there's no code behind, so the button click's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
I'm going to come into the code behind, invoke the item click event, and now we've got the code. This is where it becomes a little bit more...
You can actually write some code here.
I'm going to write some code.
Okay.
Let's see if I can actually get the syntax correct this time. So what we need to look at doing is implementing an instance of a new report object.
Okay.
Before we do that, we've got this beautiful property called data, because data is a good word for a property.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that that is not empty when it hits this.
Okay.
So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new instance of the data class. Okay. So data equals new BB data.
Beautiful.
And we're done.
And part of that constructor is populating the collection.
Absolutely. Yes. So if we quickly drill down, the constructor says create sample, it's going to populate some basic data in there.
Fantastic. So we've got the data object.
The next step is to actually create the report. Now to do this, we need to bring in the DevExpress XtraReport.
Right.
UI, very important, XtraReport.
Woo!
Now obviously I could use a using statement for DevExpress XtraReports or UI.
Right.
I'm going to call it report just to be completely consistent with my naming conventions.
We have data, we have report, and...
This is going to be a new instance, quite literally, of the DevExpress XtraUI XtraReport. So once I've instantiated the report, the next step is to actually just populate the data source.
Okay, so, yeah, report.data something, I suppose.
Report.data
source equals our little data collection there.
But be careful. We don't want it to equal data.
Oh, no?
We want it to equal a collection on data.
Oh, good point, good point.
So,
.people, yes.
People is my generic collection.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Is that going to work?
I'm going to guess we need to, hang on, we've got the data, we've got the report, we need to actually tell the designer that this is the new report.
Excellent. So here we're going to say report one designer dot open report, and just pass in that new report instance.
Okay.
Now depending on what I was doing, I might actually pre-save this out to my database so that as soon as the user clicks new, we've got something we can implement autosave or other things. Now, I'm hoping, Julian, if the demo gods have been good to us today, that that's all we should need to do.
Well, there's no squiggly underlines there. No, we're okay. We should
be good.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is just run the end-user report designer again.
Or run the application that has the end-user report designer.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this time...
Ooh, look at that. New button in the
I have
ribbon.
my new button. When I click this,
it's going to create a report, bind it to the data, and there's the data inside there.
We've got the reports.
Yeah.
We've got the data.
Magic.
I'm just going to drag in.
Oh, you're on the footer there.
Oh,
There we go.
what's the difference between friends? And this time I'll bring
Page 1 of Bucknall. There we go. That's what we want to see in the footer.
the email.
Yeah.
And straight away I want to hit print preview.
And there it is.
And
Lovely.
there we have it.
Beautiful.
So the user didn't have to worry about going through that whole, where do I select the data from, or anything like that.
Exactly.
And of course, I could do, if I really wanted to, I could implement my own wizard underneath the new dialog. If I've got different reporting types, I could have extra buttons, whatever you want to deliver as that consistent UI to your application.
Excellent. Excellent.
Now, it's one thing to create one custom report or even one report. It's another when things start getting a little bit more complicated.
All right.
As I said before, a lot of this is driven from feedback from clients and real-world use cases. Now, in Australia, which just happens to be
really?
from, the childcare system, so nurseries, childcares,
Right.
all have to undergo an audit. It's a national thing. And there's a national body that looks after that. And that's a governing body called a SEQA, or the Australian Children's Education Care Quality Assurance.
Ooh, secret, huh?
That's SEQA. And so each state has to fill in this national quality standard report. And this is where a lot of functionality that we're looking at today was sort of driven from as an example.
Yeah.
You see, with the SEQA report, it ends up being maybe a 50 or 60-page document.
Okay.
And it's built up of a summary page, as we can see here. It's then followed by an assessment summary. And then for each assessment, there's another report. Now, in this instance, all the data is the same. It's a collection of notes and ratings.
Okay.
But depending on the actual area, the color changes. And it was a great scenario for using conditional formatting inside XtraReports. So it really was one report, but depending on whether it's quality area 1, 2, 3, etc.,
Right.
the colors that you're seeing here could be applied.
I see. Okay.
Very powerful functionality. We then had things such as the actual details. So we've got a nice use of checkboxes here and subtables, other bits and pieces.
So even as a start, we have the cover kind of page, we have some kind of summary section, then we have the details section.
And then notes, and then
then-
a
I
collective
see.
summary at the end.
Okay.
If you were to try and create this as a database schema, you'd drive yourself insane.
You certainly would.
So
Well, I would anyway.
instead, the solution was to create this simple C# class,
Right.
which ended up having a collection, and then collections, and then collections in
I
collections,
see. I
which is, again, as I sort of intimated earlier. The end result is that they could produce that report really, really quickly by having separate reports.
Hang on. Whoa, whoa, whoa. If you've got separate reports and you're producing essentially one final document, how does the page numbering work? All these reports will have, you know, starting at different page numbers, and you won't know what the page numbers are until you actually run. Oh, never mind.
Absolutely. So there's two parts to your question there. Number one, how do we combine the pages?
Right. Good
Number
point.
two, how does page numbering work when you're taking separate reports and then combining them? What we'll do is we'll take a quick look at the code that was used to generate just that.
Okay.
We won't get too hung up on the classes or the structures we're passing into this method, and it has been simplified a little bit.
Okay.
But in essence, each one of these elements here is a new instance of a DevExpress extra report. It's simply been inherited to a specific name. So assessment cover inherits the UI.XtraReport.
I see.
We can see here on creation, it gets passed some data to populate some elements. The key to generating the report, and we're talking about a non-UI element here, we're talking about populate the report with data so I can do something with it.
Right.
The power is this .createDocument method. So for each report that's generated, we go through,
Right.
and you can see where we've done a custom data source versus passing something in for another reason.
All right.
Each one of these is created. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different reports.
And those reports are just created in memory, essentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You just pass
Right.
in the data, it gets created. at that point, you can traverse the pages. You can look at the elements. You can do all sorts of things with the printing engine that's inside the XtraReports tools. What's interesting to note here is at the bottom, we're taking the very first report, which is called cover.
Right.
We've got this collection called pages, and because it's a collection, we can do an add range. So then we're adding the collection of pages from the visit report to the back of the cover.
Right. And then we have
do the same thing for the report
and the ratings and the notes. I see.
So I end up with part one of the answer, one report that now contains all my reports in the order that I want.
Exactly. Okay. And here's the interesting line.
Absolutely. Part two is printing system continuous page numbering. We'll then go back through that final report and reset the page numbering on every page. So I end up with a 60 or 70 page document that is correctly numbered and looks beautiful.
Right. Yeah.
Now, we've been looking a lot at the moment from a UI point of view. Of course, at this point, I could export that straight to a PDF if I wanted to. I don't have to display it as a particular view, which again is part of the power of what we do.
So in other words, it could be done in the middle of the night and just generate a PDF, and then somebody comes in the morning and there's the PDF already ready.
Absolutely.
Or already emailed or whatever it happens to be. Yeah, I see.
One of the interesting things here is the fact that sometimes people want to edit the end result. They want to go back through and export it to, say, Word. It might be a quote template. So you're having the system go through and generate a nice professional-looking quote, but you want to tweak it.
Right.
Now, if we were to just look at the report designer here, let's hit print preview. By the way, what we're looking at with the report designer, we've also got a web version of the report designer.
That's true.
Completely HTML5 written, so if you're working on a web project, you can do just about everything we're talking about on the web.
Yep. Yes, because we're basically writing WinForms applications at the moment.
With this example.
Yeah.
Now, the export functionality outside of or inside of XtraReports is pretty powerful. Straight out of the box, I can export to PDF, HTML, MHT, RTF, XLS, extended XLS, CSV, plain text, or as an image. I've also got the ability of sending that straight out in any one of those formats to my default mail client.
Right.
Again, you can disable that functionality if you don't want your client to have it, or you can limit it. You could say, I only want them to be able to create a PDF.
Okay.
And the PDF is not reliant on you having an Adobe PostScript driver on your machine. We generate the PDF for you. And of course, we've got our PDF library inside Document Server. If I was to send this out as a RTF file, I've got some other options along the way. It's going to ask me where I want to save it. And so I'll say, on my desktop, thank you. And here's my first instance. And yes, I want to open this file.
Now it's going to open it in Word. Oh, Word.
Because Word is the default editor for my RTF.
Okay.
Now, what you'll notice, and this is both a good and bad thing. Oh, thank you, Microsoft. How about we deal with that after? Because it's a good and bad thing. Because XtraReports is a banded report designer,
right.
The export, obviously I haven't been into it on this machine, but have I? It's going to give me this layout in boxes, as elements.
Oh,
because it's literally
okay.
going through and saying, well, you're an element on a page, just as you would in HTML. I'm going to create this object by object.
Okay, so we have a bunch of text boxes on the page, essentially, for RTF.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so that's not going to be conducive to easy editing.
No. Because, yeah, exactly. What's happening here is XtraReports is producing an exact layout view in an RTF document of the report itself. It's not trying to say, oh, look, it's just the same information on every page. I'm just going to make a table, and you've lost the layout, you've lost the look and feel, and all the rest of it.
And that's the important thing, the layout, because in my report design, I could come along and I could say, okay, I've got a chart, and I want to create a chart here.
Right.
So it's got to honor that whole
Exactly. The whole layout that you've designed has got to be replicated inside the RTF file.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, it could be that you're wanting to do a report, like I said, maybe a company quote or something else like that, which starts to move outside the realms of banded reports or extra reports.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of different ways that you can actually handle that. One of my favorite ways when I'm talking to people is to look at the rich text editor.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of generating an extra report, you can do something as simple as create a Word template.
Right.
Put some bookmarks in there or some calculated field markers in there.
Right. I
And
see where you're going here.
using the DevExpress document server, open the Word document using the API, which that's the report demo. I want the other one, the other white meat. This one here. Switch to Rich Edit. Using the Layout API, you can actually traverse the entire Word document. So you can inject all the elements you want where you want to do it, but what you end up with, of course, is a Word document.
Right.
Still inside your own interface. So you're not even saying, oh, I'm going to generate this and then send people to Microsoft Word to edit it. You're simply going to be going, we've now generated this layout, and it could be nice and complicated. It could have page areas, floating pictures. You can see from the API and the document tree here, I can traverse that whole thing.
Okay.
You can honor protected areas. So it could be, well, I only want my salespeople to edit just this paragraph. I don't want them touching the price.
Right.
So you can add all that functionality, and you've not had to go outside your application.
Okay.
Which becomes really, really powerful.
So in essence, the RTF export is fine as far as it goes, but if you really wanted to have a report which was not necessarily based upon a banded report design through XtraReports, you can actually just go in, create an RTF document, put in your own layout of that document, and then you write a little bit of code which will actually insert like a mail merge type process.
Exactly.
Insert the data from your data sources, and bingo, you have a much more flexible RTF report than just exporting a banded report.
Correct.
Okay.
So you've got the best of both worlds. You could do traditional reporting with all the flexibility we've looked at, or utilize some of our other libraries, such as the document server library, which can generate PDFs. When you can generate PDFs from a non-existent or blank page, insert what you want, or an RTF layout, where you're letting the user interact.
Beautiful.
And there's so many other functions with that become available.
Beautiful.
Now there's one last thing I want to just cover before we look at questions.
Okay.
And that is, there's something that sits in between those two things.
Uh-oh.
And it's part of our product range. It's been part of our product range for a little while, and it's called XtraReports.
Okay.
Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes you just want to create a report that is a flowing Word document.
Yes.
You just want to be able to add some random text, dump some things in, drag some data across. And that's what XtraReports allows you to do. Very, very powerful. What we have here is a Visual Studio solution. We have a form, and on that form I've simply dragged in the snap control. So hopefully Visual Studio doesn't do what Word just did to me. And if I look in my toolbox for snap control, it's just one control. As you saw with the previous entry that we did, it quite literally builds itself. I drag it on here, and using the smart tag elements, I get to nominate what I want in there, etc., etc. I'm just going to run this and see what it built. There is zero code inside this project. Again, it's all built into the framework.
And indeed.
I can interact with it. I can still add my own flair to it if I wanted to. Otherwise, I get to use it out of the box. So here we've got our Form 1 with our snap control.
Okay.
In essence, this is just the rich or RTF editor.
Right.
So I can say, you know, hello world. In here I've got the functionality for spelling. I can add comments. I've got all that cool stuff that I had just before. At the same time, I can come along and I can say I want to add a new data source. Should start to look familiar. We're going to have a little wizard pop up. But look,
right. Yeah.
Same as we had before. So again, even with this product, I could bind it directly to a preset database, a preset table, or Poco.
Exactly.
Whatever we want. We'll go with the database, and again, we'll pick our local instance of SQL Express.
Where would we be without SQL Express?
I want to show you here, it's the same list of available things. So from a provider point of view, there's a lot of stuff in there. Now, interestingly, and I know that this is going to come back and bite me on the proverbial, but if you've got a complex ODBC driver that you want to hook into, you could hook it into an Access database and then hook your report into that Access database.
Yep.
Snazzy. So even if it's not on the list, there are some workarounds to that. Of course, if you wanted to, you could build your own data handler, a little bit like we did with the Poco stuff anyway.
Right. In fact, that boils down to things like web services, for example. They will also come in as basically a CLR object, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. I will, once we've looked at this, I'll take a look at that as well. So here we've got our AdventureWorks database. Again, I get to pick the query.
Run a query builder, which is probably
quicker,
neater.
In this case, I might want some products, so that would be production products. Here we go. And
beautiful.
Again, it shows me that I can attach to multiple if I want. Here, I only really want product name and color.
Yeah.
Let's try that. Resize my screen.
So you can get the OK button.
And we hit finish. Just as we saw inside the report designer, the Data Explorer is going to show me exactly what's there. I've got Hello World. I'd like to introduce you to our new range. Now all I need to do, quite literally, is I could drag that header across.
Beautiful. Look at that.
And I've got a WYSIWYG editor with my information in there. And of course, I've got all the usual tools of being able to edit, manipulate, table design, do what I want. And of course, yes, I even have the mail merge option. So it provides a really nice way of interacting in a WYSIWYG format when banded reports don't quite work.
Exactly.
So snap reporting is again available inside the subscriptions there. All right. What I'll do is quickly jump back to our report demo. And you brought up an interesting point with web services.
Yeah. Because it's not a database. I mean, there's a database behind the web service, but the web service itself is
an object.
Is an object, yeah.
Usually expressed in either JSON or XML, however it's going to come down. So what we have here is a service reference to an existing web service. In this particular case, there was some data that I wanted to return. So what I needed to do in order to make that happen is create this class called Scope of Works. This has some job data attached to that particular thing. What you do is exactly the same principle as the Poco. So this class,
we have a list of sections there.
A list of sections. The section then contains, section.
Right.
The section contains a list of headings.
Right. Ooh.
Headings contains a list of paragraphs.
Ooh, look at this.
Paragraphs contains a list of items.
Right.
And items contains some data I want to get to.
Right.
Now, the only thing that you would need to do here when you implement this particular class is you'll be populating the data yourself from the web service.
Indeed.
Okay, so you're going to loop through your data and then be binding or adding that into your constructors for that class. But again, in essence, you're just using it as an external data source. You're just mapping it to what you want your end user to see, and away it all goes. Just the same way that we saw with the BB data, this particular thing has a return or a shared method or a static method called getData. So back inside my report designer class, I could also say that I want scope of works.
Right.
and we'll set that up as a property. And then inside here, instead of binding it to data people, I could actually say scope of works equals new scope of works.
Got you.
At that point, when I instantiate the class, I'd actually have it go off to the web service, return the data, so it's in the collection, and then my data source will be scope of works dot sections.
Okay.
And I could simply do that. If at this point, because I've instantiated my thing here, I want to call, I could say get data on the parent class back in scope of works. Being a static, I don't even need to instantiate it to populate that initial list. So there's different ways that you can achieve the same result, whether it be data from a web service, data from a database, wherever it's coming from. You can do traditional reporting, you can do ad hoc reporting, you can build your own quick, and I mean quick, as in one method that loops through your data and pushes out to bookmarks inside your Word template.
Right.
So whatever it is, we've got you covered.
Excellent. Excellent.
How are we going with questions?
I don't know.
You've been too engrossed.
I've been too engrossed and having a look and see what you're saying. Now I've got to find the question list here. Oops, pressing the wrong thing.
Okay, questions.
Here we are. Boom. Oh, we have a whole few here. Let's, okay. Eric Juarez asks, can I connect with analysis services? Obviously, yes.
When you say analysis services, I'd be a little bit, I'm just going to jump in and say yes. I don't have your authority. I'm not that high up in the company. No. You can obviously build your own bridge or interface between analysis services.
Right.
There's no direct connection from our current list of providers into that.
Indeed. Yeah. I'm assuming that this is the same when using WPF instead of WinForms. Well, WPF, the report designer is not there yet. So
do I pick up on? Currently, you can use the WinForms end-user report designer hosted inside your WPF application.
Right.
But stay tuned for the next few weeks.
Yes, we'll have more news about WPF report designer. Can we add custom functions in calculated fields?
You can extend your functionality, yes. So, short answer, yes.
Right. Can I embed the report designer in a user control to use it in, for example, a tab page? Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
When will the when will the WPF report designer be finished?
Not allowed to say.
Not allowed to say, but stay tuned to our blogs.
Talking of which, webinars this coming over the next few weeks for 15.2.
Yes.
Make sure you bookmark that.
Yeah. Is it possible for end users to change the field names and the records page to bring to horizontal? I'm not quite sure what that means. For the collection of object binding, is it possible to add parameters?
You can certainly use parameters in there, and you can pass parameters back through to the instantiation of your report. So yes. These are good questions, Julian.
Someone's Saif Khan has come up with a great idea for another webinar. We should do some kind of explanation on the bands in XtraReports. It can be helpful for new users. So it's
absolutely.
Kind of
well, there are a number of tutorials, and I know that Seth did a number of really good report webinars that are on our YouTube channel. So check out that first, and if needs be, we're more than happy to take on suggestions for future presentations.
The Safe Ads basically, Snap Reports is my little hero.
Excellent. Nice feedback. Can you email that to us so we can put that on the website?
Is there a way to resize fields to data? So the last name field to show the complete last name. Yeah, we were getting the default size of the last name field on the report was too small for some of the surnames. So is there a way to automatically resize the field?
I don't know about automatically, and I think in some cases.
Yeah, the problem is you're designing a report and then you're applying the data. So the report design doesn't know how big your data is in terms of text.
Correct. And if you were binding it to a database, yes, you could go off the schema and we could set that length, but that's not necessarily the length you want. So it's a good use for scripts, though.
Miko is asking, we have tons of Word-based mail merge documents. Is there any means to import them into the report designer as a starting point to create new reports? That's a fascinating question.
The answer is no, but...
Yeah, I know. The answer is no, but it sounds like, hey, this could be a new feature.
Well, there's two
sets to explore it, I think.
There's two sets of imports that we get asked for commonly. Things like the Word-based one. Obviously, competitive products, which is always interesting.
Oh, yeah.
But certainly SRSS.
Yes.
Or SSRS, SQL Server Report
Services, yes.
And we get a lot of people migrating from that through to XtraReports or even our report server product. So short answer is there's no quick and easy way to do that, but we're happy for our customers to maybe build something.
Right. Wayne asks, when is 15.2 supposed to be released? Oh,
well,
shush.
The webinars are up on the webinar page now. So we're doing the launch webinars last week in December, last week in November.
First week of December, yes. So it'll be around then.
Soon.
Yeah, finger by the side of the nose then. I know what I mean. Wink, wink, wink. Any suggestion when creating a report that you want to export to XLS? My reports don't export cleanly to XLS. Mary, I think that one is more of a bring it up with support, and then we'll see what kind of problems you're running into when exporting to Excel, and we'll be able to help you. Or
one thing there as well, there is a specific property on each field for Excel exporting.
Oh,
so
really?
you can set the formatting, how it's going to be exported. So certainly, if you are having particular issues, log a support ticket. Once you've done that, email Julian with the support ticket number, and he can work with you and follow that up.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple more questions here, and we're running out of time pretty quickly. We have like 2 minutes left. Let me think. What's new in 15.2 for reporting? Please watch our blogs. We're blogging like crazy at the moment. And can you export reports to RDLC? What's RDLC? No.
No.
I don't even know what it is, so the answer must be no.
There's no reason why in custom requirements like that you can't create your own export. Certainly the classes are extendable enough. You can traverse through the report data, but again, I'd probably suggest you raise it with the support center, see if anybody in the NG, because it goes a lot further than you and I. I mean, you know, there's some pretty smart guys on the team that transcend their knowledge.
Okay, I think that's going to have to be it because we're up to the hour. So please check out devexpress.com/webinars for all upcoming webinars and to access our previously recorded webinar sessions. And as Paul just said, we have just published a series of new webinars on what's coming up in version 15.2. So please do register for those. And as I said, we're blogging about the new features inside 15.2 starting from like 2 days ago or something like that. So things are going wild with regard to 15.2.
There's some cool stuff happening.
Yeah. And please note also that today's webinar will be available later on in our DevExpress YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/user/developerexpress. And that's it for this one. Thank you to Paul for leading this webinar. I just basically jumped in every now and again. And thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Goodbye for now.